So welcome, Dr. Alan Marcovitz. I'm Barry Brett, a volunteer interviewer with the Boca Raton Historical Society. Today is Tuesday, August 16th, 2016, and this interview is for the Jewish Oral History Project. We are taping this interview at the television studios at Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida. Okay, Dr. Marcovitz, this is a Jewish oral history project, and we will start with learning about your involvement with the Jewish community since your move to Boca Raton. So, I know that you have a rich history and knowledge about the growth of the Jewish population. You witnessed this firsthand. There's a great deal to talk about. So let's try and go through this chronologically. And thank you for your notes. That was very helpful. So what brought you to Boca Raton and what year?
I was brought to Boca Raton to start an electrical engineering department at Florida Atlantic University. I had met the dean as a student, and he sort of kept track of me and invited me down.
And what year was that?
That was 1970, in spring of 1970.
Okay. Where were you originally from?
I grew up in Boston area, in Dorchester as a child, and then we moved to Brookline. I graduated from Brookline High School, then went to MIT, where I got a bachelor's and master's degree, and then moved on to Columbia University, where I got my doctorate, and taught at the University of Maryland for 6 or 7 years before coming down to Florida.
So, was that culture shock? How much of a change was that for you? And what was the Jewish community like when you arrived?
It was a big culture shock. I had told Dean Ackhurst that I would come only if he understood that I really didn't think I wanted to move to Florida. But I came and I got excited about the opportunity. There was just a tad of a Jewish community. We knew of 28 identified Jewish families in Boca Raton in 1970. Most of them belonged to what was then the Boca Raton Hebrew congregation, which is now Temple Bethel. A few of them, as we did, joined Temple Shalom in Pompano Beach. That was a conservative synagogue, and there were 3 or 4 families from Boca that were already going down there. I just lost my train of thought for a second.
So you arrived from New York, Boston, and then you hit
D.C. area.
And then you hit
Florida.
And then you hit Florida, and there's culture shock. What were some of the things that were different for you?
Well, there was barely a Jewish community here. We kept a kosher home, and so we had to go to North Miami Beach or West Palm Beach to get kosher food. There were, other than the Temple Shalom and this tiny congregation meeting in the Moravian Church, there was no other Jewish congregation between Fort Lauderdale and Lake Worth at the time. We didn't have any problems being Jewish. We moved into an apartment for 1 year called Spanish Oaks. It's right across from the university. And it was a brand new building, and it was the only place in Boca Raton at that time that would rent to blacks. The Boca Raton News had sent around the two groups of people to check out rentals, one black couple and one white couple, and that was the only place they got the same answer. Indeed, there was a black family where he was an accountant for IBM, living right below us, and we integrated their New Year's party.
Was there a problem for Jewish families?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't. I've really not seen any personal anti-Semitism in all the years I've been down here.
Okay, so you arrived, and you have this apartment, and you said there were very few services. I remember you mentioned something about Publix.
Yeah, okay. Publix at Passover had a Passover display, one column about that wide, with everything Jewish they could find, from matzah, yes, to Hanukkah candles and anything else. But if we need, for our supplies, we had to go to North Miami Beach.
I just want to go back. So someone else had mentioned this Moravian Church.
Yes.
What was it like? The services were held at the Moravian Church? And where is the Moravian Church?
The Moravian Church is at the corner of 12th Avenue and Palmetto on the south side of Palmetto. It's not the Moravian Church anymore. I don't remember what it's called anymore. It may have changed since the last time I wrote notes in there. But a classic story about the Moravian Church. When Temple Bethel built their building, they had a dedication service. We were there, and the pastor for the Moravian Church was there, and he said, we're sure going to miss having God in our building on Friday nights.
That's lovely. Okay. So, was it different? Did you have certain expectations when you came in? Was it different? Were your expectations different or the same?
No, I think my expectations in terms of community were pretty well on. On our interview trip, the dean took us to Friday night services in Pompano Beach, and we met the rabbi and discussed things with him. We knew there wasn't yet much of a Jewish community, but there was some, and we were willing to give it a go.
Okay, so let's get into that. When you say give it a go, how did you give it a go?
Well, we joined Temple Shalom in Pompano Beach. I became active there. I was vice president of the men's club. I was on the board of trustees. We also became associate members at Bethel here, and I even served a year on their board before we started Binet Torah. So, kids went to Hebrew school in Pompano Beach. My daughter was bat mitzvah there after we had started Binet Torah, but she had done all her education there and was prepared by the cantor there. And so Binet Torah met at Temple Shalom that Saturday morning.
But you said things changed for your son's bar mitzvah. What did you?
Well, by the time my son's bar mitzvah, Binet Torah was going and had regular services, and so he had his bar mitzvah at Binet Torah.
You had mentioned something about the drive to
Well, this was before I-95 came to Boca Raton, so it was a half hour at least schlep in each direction, 3 times a week for Hebrew school. We did carpool. There were a couple other families taking children down too.
Okay. What were some of the major forces, do you think, that increased the Jewish population from 1970?
Well, I think that there were 4 things that happened starting in 1967 that all contributed. One was the movement of IBM and a number of Jewish engineers to the area, and that was followed by some other electronic companies a few years later. A second was the start of Bethel, Boca Raton Hebrew Congregation, which I know that you've interviewed a number of people from there, so I won't go into that much. And the third thing was Boca Raton Community Hospital. It's now regional hospital, but it attracted a lot of Jewish doctors. And finally, it was Florida Atlantic University that brought down a bunch of Jewish faculty. In the year I was hired, there was a Jewish dean hired and another Jewish department head hired. So we were building up a Jewish faculty. There were a few Jews there before. Indeed, on my interview trip, one of my interviews was with Sam Portnoy, who was a professor in the history department. And he couldn't figure out why in the world he was on an interview list for someone for a job in engineering. And he found out that it was because he was the best connection to the Jewish community.
And also, if you want to add something about Bethel, that's fine. I mean, don't feel restricted in any of your comments if you think
Okay.
it's important.
No, but I know that I've watched other talks that have detailed their growth. So.
Okay. You also mentioned the importance of the Boca Raton Hotel and Club, built by Addison Meisner.
Well, Boca Raton Hotel and Club was Boca Raton for many years. During World War II, the Army took it over. The Army Air Corps had built a base in what's now FAU and Boca Raton Airport. And so they took over the hotel and club. After the war, the land was donated by the government so that part of it became FAU, and one runway was left for an airport. It was bought by the Shine family in 1946, I think is the date. They were Jewish, but they maintained a no Jews allowed policy at the hotel. Their son was the attorney for McCarthy during the McCarthy hearings in the 50s. When they bought the hotel, the Palm Beach Post said that the Shines bought Boca Raton.
Huh. Interesting. So, how did you become active in the Boca Jewish community? You and your first wife. I know you told me she was very active too.
Yes.
So what were some of the steps that you took to become active right away, and then how did that continue?
Okay, well, first of all, we did become members and attended sometimes the Temple Bethel, or Boca Raton Hebrew Congregation, which was the only show in town. My wife got involved with the Boca Raton Lighthouse Point chapter of Hadassah, became president of the chapter, became regional vice president for membership, and started a number of Hadassah chapters in the various retirement developments around. And we were active in Pompano Beach. After 3 years or so, we decided that we needed more here, that Boca Raton was ready for a conservative congregation, and so a group of us met at our home in 1974 in March, and we decided to found a congregation, and we named it Binet Torah.
And that's a major step. So
Yep.
how many families were invited, and then what happened?
There were 10 families involved at the time. We decided to meet once a month for the time being on Saturday mornings, because Boca Raton Hebrew had a Friday night service, no Saturday services. So we started meeting on Saturday mornings. After a couple of meetings, we decided we needed some rabbinical help. Our first meeting, by the way, was on the seventh day of Passover in 1974. In a bank building that's no longer there on East Palmetto Park Road. And we used that room quite often on Friday nights and Saturday mornings, because it was a beautiful spot. And Saturday banking hadn't come to Boca Raton yet. It was used as a passageway from the parking lot on weekdays. So we made reservations 1 week at a time was all they would take reservations for, but the woman in charge never got anyone to sign up for a Friday night or Saturday use of the building.
So that's just amazing to me, how you have 10 families in your living room and you start a temple.
Right.
So you say it so casually, it's wonderful, but then what happened? How did it proceed? It's a major temple now.
At our first meeting, our first services, we had 50 people attend. And we grew slowly over the next year or two to 30, 40, 50 families. And by the end of the first year, we decided we needed to hold high holiday services. We couldn't do it the very first year. So we needed a rabbi. And the rabbi, Seymour Friedman, who had been with us for the first year once a month couldn't accommodate us, and so we found Rabbi Nathan Zelizer, who had retired to Hallandale Beach from Ohio. He had been rabbi of the conservative congregation in Ohio since 1943. He was a graduate of the Jewish Theological Seminary. Actually, it wasn't since 1943. It was 43 years. I'm sorry. And he had gone to Hallandale Beach, and he wanted to be able to walk and to read, and he called Rabbi Friedman, who was the director of the United Synagogue for the Southeast region, and said, "Find me something. How much can I walk? And what's the use of learning if I can't teach somebody?" And so we came to an agreement, and he came up 2 weekends a month, which we had Friday and Saturday services, and we also had Friday evening services with just lay people the other 2 weeks of the month.
Okay, and then what were your responsibilities once this temple got started?
I was the first president. My wife was really the inspiration behind the temple, but I was the first president. And after that, serving 3 years as president, I was treasurer, I was secretary, I was financial secretary. I've been on the board for many years, and so I've been involved and still am involved.
Were there challenges being Jewish in a small population? And then you told me the population grew.
Well, yeah, there were challenges. My kids found their Jewish connections through United Synagogue Youth rather than through the local community so much, because when my daughter was in high school, there were maybe one other Jewish kid in each of her classes. On the other hand, when she graduated high school, they decided to have 5 valedictorians because all of them had 4.6 something grade point averages, and it depended upon whether they took gym in 9th grade or 10th grade, because the averages only started with 10th grade, and there was no advanced gym courses, and so they decided to have 5, and 3 of them were Jewish. 1 from Bethel, 2 from Binet Torah. The son still is now again a member of Binet Torah. They commute from Wellington. The girl from Temple Bethel went to Hebrew Union College and became a rabbi. So there was a community, but it wasn't so much a local community. The kids were very involved in USY, went to Jewish summer camps, and that sort of thing. So to keep a Jewish presence, you had to reach out a little bit further.
Okay, and you also had mentioned that your son was the first bar mitzvah in the new building. Where was that held? In
our first building, which was on 4th Avenue and Glades Road.
What did you tell me about the Lions Club and the weight?
There was a bar mitzvah in the congregation the year before that was held in the Lions Club. The father of the bar mitzvah was very, very active in the Lions Club, and so that was the best place to hold it in terms of space.
Okay, so from 10 families, from 28 families, the population has grown. What percentage now do you think are Jewish community?
Of Greater Boca Raton, it's got to be close to 50%. I mean, the last census the last community study that was done, which is 11 years ago, I believe had 130-something thousand Jews living in Boca Raton.
So, in comparing Jewish life to then and now for you, how did you grow with the community as far as your Torah lessons and things like that?
Okay. I had not grown up as a particularly Jewish educated person. I went to Hebrew school 5 days a week and was bar mitzvah in Mishkan Tefillah in Roxbury, Massachusetts, which then moved to Newton, and I was married there. But I wasn't particularly Jewishly active until I met my first wife, Diane, who was more active. She taught Sunday school. She had graduated from the high school program of the Boston Hebrew University, and she came from a kosher home. I didn't, so we became kosher. When we started Binet Torah, we then became active in United Synagogue. I served in the regional part and also on the national scene. We went to several United Synagogue annual meetings, actually biennial meetings at the Concord Hotel, blessed memory, and each time I came back more committed and learned more. And when my son was studying for bar mitzvah lessons, he took private lessons with the man who had been Diane's principal when we were in Maryland, and then we hired as our part-time principal for a couple of years at Binet Torah. I attended all the lessons, learned to read Torah at that time. I had learned to read Haftorah when my daughter was bat mitzvah. I had the Kant to make a recording of the Haftorah, and I learned it and read it the year before her bat mitzvah at our second service of Binet Torah.
That's great. So you've witnessed, tremendous transformations within the Jewish community.
Yes.
Have you noticed a shift from east to west or west to east?
Oh, definitely. It's moved to the west, central and west. I mean, there's lots of Jews along the Jog Road corridor, as well as out in far west. I mean, there were quite a few Jews along A1A, but in between it was not a particularly Jewish area. It was all built up. I mean, the Jews came in and bought new housing.
And what about the age population? Have you noticed a change in that? Or?
It's younger now than it was. I mean, when we started our religious school, we had 20 kids. Now our religious school has, I don't know, something like 300 children. We have a preschool with more than 100 children, maybe even larger than that. Shirley Enselberg talked about that, I believe. And there are 3 or 4 day schools in the community where a lot of our kids study.
And when you say we, you mean at Binet Torah?
Binet Torah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you again, what change have you noticed? What stands out the most as far as a changing population from 1970 to now?
In changing population?
Or change in the Jewish community?
Yeah. Well, there are more people who have been here for a while than there were. In 1980, there were very few people that had been in Boca Raton for more than 10 years. Now that's very different. Families have grown up here. Lots of younger people started moving here. Part of that was the hospital that drew a lot. There must be a majority of Jewish doctors down here now, and those are mostly people with children. As far as the change in the community, you have all the choices you could want as to what kind of synagogue you might want to belong to. You can find kosher food on almost every corner. Not quite, that's an exaggeration, but there are more than a dozen kosher restaurants in town, which there weren't any back in 1970. There was a kosher restaurant then in Pompano Beach, but that was it. We have kosher bakery. There's just so many more people. So.
Okay, let me just ask you a question about, so your first wife was very active, but your second wife,
And my second wife also was active. When my first wife died suddenly, my second wife became president of the sisterhood, and so and shortly thereafter I married her. Her name is Allen, Allyn, as opposed to my Alan. Funny story. At that time, the Binet Torah, the president of the sisterhood, would present a gift to bar mitzvah children, and she was called up by the rabbi as Mrs. Allen Marcovitz. And there was a stranger in the congregation who the next week was out at the Federation and complaining bitterly, how could the rabbi refer to the president of the sisterhood by her husband's name? And of course, the person out at the Federation was the rabbi who had married us. So he broke out laughing and explained to her what was going on. Going back a little bit, Federation started as a branch of the West Palm Beach Federation. And in around 1980 or so, they decided to open a branch down here, and I was on a committee that recommended a leader for that, Bruce Warshall, and who is still in the community. So he started their office here, and then it very shortly broke off as a separate federation.
so you certainly have a very strong connection to the Jewish community from its growth to now.
Yes.
What does that mean to you, to have come down to this community we're not familiar with, and to have been such an active force and to be such a participant in the Jewish community?
I'm very happy here. I'm proud of some of the things that I did. I'm very proud of the people who carried on, because I'm not a driving force at Binet Torah anymore. I'm still there. I'm still active, but there are other people that do most of the work now.
So is there anything else that I did not ask you that you want to tell us about the Jewish community, or a memory that you have, or a story that you have, or something that stands out that you want to be recorded for historic purposes? Jewish history, community?
Well, in some ways, there are 4, I think, congregations that are breakaways from Binet Torah. The first was Beth Ami, which separated from our congregation when we were deciding to move west, and most of these were older people, didn't want to pay higher dues that we needed to support a religious school, and so they bought our old building. The first president of Boca Raton synagogue, the Orthodox synagogue, had been on the board of Binet Torah for a year before they started there. Then what's now Shari Tefillah, no, is that the right name? Is also people who decided to leave Binet Torah for one reason or another. There have always been political problems going on in all congregations. We had fights when I was in Temple Shalom. We had problems with personnel. Every shul does have those problems. So that's one of the things. Something else that popped into my mind and then popped right out.
Well, you're a first-hand witness
Yes.
To the growth of the Jewish population.
Yes.
So we thank you for your contribution. Thank
You're
you, Alan
welcome.
Marcovitz, very much for the interview today.
Nice talking with you.